WATD presents John Paul, the Car Doctor. All things automotive. Have questions? Call 781-837-4900. Now, here's John Paul, the Car Doctor.
Sunday morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Car Doctor program on 95.9 WATD. Remember, you can always listen to us online if you're away from the area. You can just tell your smart speaker, smart thing, whatever it is, and just say, hey, I want to listen to WATD. You can do that. And, of course, you can always find the programs on the podcast later on. You can go to WATD's website and go to my podcast channel or just search for Car Doctor Radio, and you'll find the programs there. And we've been running my program as a rerun at night. I got to find out more about that. But it runs at night. I think maybe Monday night or something too. So find out more about that in case you want to hear it. We're going to be talking about, we kind of rushed through the Honda Pilot review last week. We're going to probably talk about that again. The Mazda CX-50, we're going to talk about that. But most importantly, our guest is with us on the line, Brenda Priddy. She is a world-renowned spy photographer. Brenda, good morning and welcome to the Car Doctor program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, you probably don't remember, but we chatted on the radio probably 25 years ago, and you told me a little bit about your spy photography business and how you took a picture of a vehicle, and as I remember, you said something like you took a picture of a car, you sent it to a Buff magazine expecting to get a T-shirt, and you got a paycheck.
Exactly. It was pretty surprising. It was the beginning of an amazing career. And
you were one of the few people, I think, that I want to back up a little bit. Do you think the business that you were in for so long and really made, quite a name for yourself, now that everyone carries a camera in their pocket, is sort of not as cool as it was once, or not as lucrative as it was once?
Definitely not as lucrative. And there's a lot of reasons. One reason, a lot of magazines went out of business. A lot of Buff books closed down. Others changed ownership. And, sometimes you would sell to one magazine, and then these days, unfortunately, the publishers think that all their publications can use it for the same price. So that's a problem. It's definitely not as lucrative. Magazines encourage readers to submit photos, and most of the time they don't pay for those. And they would rather use those photos than, high quality, high resolution photos sent with a lot of intelligence, a lot of information. They don't want to pay for them, and so they use the free stuff.
Yeah, it is. It is a little disappointing, and I remember, always looking at your stuff, and I don't quite know how you did it, because you would get cars at different angles. You would get a lot more detail than just something, and I've been to the Detroit area a bunch of times and saw some sort of camouflage cars, but I couldn't get them quick enough, but you always managed to do that, and it was always pretty amazing. Did you have any kind of special tricks you did to try to get these vehicles and kind of find out more information about them?
Well, yes and no. Tricks for shooting. One, it was just have a lot of patience and try to get into the minds of the engineers. Try to predict where they were going if you spotted them. I won't use the word chase. People always say, you chase the vehicle. Well, I didn't do any, high-speed chases. I might have followed them, but it was a lot easier to kind of predict where they were going and wait for them sometimes. And they didn't know how to handle me. They would try to intimidate me and scare me away. And I would just, if I could, walk around the vehicle and take as many pictures as I could. So that was actually a fun part.
So it was sort of like the hunt for the vehicles was the fun then, right?
Oh, it was a blast. It really was. And, before before cameras on cell phones, the engineers would walk up to my car and write my license plate down, trying to intimidate me like they were going to do something with that information. And so I started getting different license plates every year. They were personalized ones, just kind of humorous, in my opinion, just to kind of throw them off. One said "gotcha." Another had the German word for female spy. One year I had a spy camp, and so my license plate said spy camp. So they didn't know what to do because I wasn't trying to really hide from them. And I would also give them little trinkets, which was kind of crazy. But at one point, I had engineers that would normally run from me, lining up to get little rubber wristbands or something, or, little things that, just little trinkets from the business.
And I suppose, after a while, you become sort of friends with these folks. Like you said, they kind of line up for trinkets. But at some point, you build up some sort of relationship, right?
Sometimes yes and sometimes no. It really depends. I mean, I have been physically assaulted by engineers. I have been, they've attempted to run me off the road, and some other really dangerous situations. But there are a few that, I've stayed in touch with, and they don't give me any information. They've never made it easy for me to photograph their cars. But yeah, we had kind of a common respect for each other.
So you could go out and have coffee with somebody afterwards, and
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've done that both, in Death Valley, where I've spent a lot of summers shooting them, or even in Detroit when I go to Detroit to visit. I'll go out with some of the engineers, or even with the engineers and their families. It's been fascinating. But again, the engineers never made it easy for me to shoot their test cars.
Right. Sometimes, especially these days on the internet, but probably even before there was the internet, you would see some photos that were released, and I always got the feeling that it was actually just the car companies that released it, trying to build a little buzz about their vehicles. Do you think that was actually true?
Oh, definitely. There are some car companies that would drop envelopes off, like Automotive News, Auto Week, and some other publications, and, just anonymously drop envelopes off with pictures. Sometimes the cars were in camouflage, sometimes they weren't. But, that's, and it still happens today. Even today, when you look at some spy photos, they're not really spy photos. They're pictures that manufacturers have released, even though the vehicles are in camouflage. They might even have a website on the bottom of the camouflage, so you can go and keep up with the development of the vehicle.
Yeah, that I guess that kind of gives you a little bit of a clue. You mentioned spy camp. What was spy camp?
Well, it was it was about a 1-week trip, and we stayed in a little town called Beatty, Nevada. The camp, I did not take people into Death Valley National Park because there are special permits you need for that. But people had their own vehicles, and they were able to take the information that I taught them and go to the places that I told them about, and take their own spy photos. They learn the do's and the don'ts. Don't touch vehicles. Don't do anything dangerous. Don't break the speed limit. But, they kind of learn about how to walk around the vehicles and how to get good photos.
And Death Valley is where all the hot weather testing is done, right?
Most of the hot weather testing in this country is done in Death Valley, and I would spend about 4 months every year in Death Valley. this year, if you follow the news, Death Valley broke all heat records, which is just crazy.
I think it was, 130
ever.
degrees or something, right?
Oh, yeah. I didn't even check that. I mean, I
Yeah.
live in Phoenix, and we broke all the heat wave records, too, here in Phoenix. We're still over 110 every day. But, Death Valley was usually about 12 degrees hotter than Phoenix. So it was an interesting place. But, it sounds crazy, but it is a very dry place, and it's even drier than Phoenix. And so, I could tolerate it. You just stay hydrated. You stay out of the sun as best you can. And I loved it. I've never, ever complained about the heat in Death Valley.
Did you go to cold weather testing sites too?
I did not, but I had people that worked for me that were in cold weather testing sites, such as, the UP in Michigan, in Sweden, and other places. So they did that. I did the hot weather testing.
Well, and I would think where you were so used to hot weather, when it gets to be 70 degrees, you're probably cold.
Oh, exactly. I put on a wool sweater or something.
Yeah, exactly. Tell us, speaking of hot weather places, you've become quite the tour guide for Cuba almost. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I started going to Cuba in 2013, and I had no idea that Americans could go to Cuba. It was surprising. And I always wanted to go to see the old cars. I really didn't know what to expect, but I wanted to go to see the old cars. And a local radio station was taking a tour group there in 2013, and so I joined them. And I thought, this is a place that so many of my friends in the auto industry would love to visit. So when I came back, I started putting together groups. And we try to go once a year, if not more. It's hard because we don't really advertise. And I have to find about 10 or 12 people that want to go the same week. So it's a challenge. My last trip there was this past May. And we do a variety of things. Most important, the U.S. government has a lot of regulations on how you can go and why you can go. And so we actually go to help the Cuban people. And we bring things that are in need for Cuban people. This year, my 2 checked suitcases were completely full of everything from powdered milk to over-the-counter medications and clothing, shoes, and things like that. But our trips, besides visiting people and providing things that they need, we also spend time with the car guys in Cuba, the car clubs, some people that restore cars, just the everyday taxi drivers. So we spend a lot of time with the car people, and then we go around to different, cities and areas in Cuba as well to experience that. This last trip was I don't know how to explain it, a very Cuban experience. The people are going through some very tough times. Besides having a very bad shortage of food, they don't have electricity most of the time because the Cuban government literally turns it off. And we got to experience a lot of days and nights without power.
Wow.
And I just chalked that off to the Cuban experience. It was not comfortable. It wasn't easy. But, these people do it every day. And so it was pretty interesting this time.
I remember somebody I talked to years ago kind of cleaned out their garage and brought, spark plugs and distributor caps and stuff with them. And they were in a taxi cab that wasn't running that well and, handed the guy like a set of spark plugs or something, and the guy almost cried because he was so, because it was something he just couldn't get, and he was just so grateful because of it. And it's amazing the ingenuity. There was some show on TV a few years ago about kind of the Cuban car culture, and they were putting an engine from a front-wheel drive car into, like, I don't know, I'm making it up, a 55 Ford, and so of course it was an engine that would normally sit sideways in the front. They were turning it around and mounting it the other way, and as they were trying to install it, they dropped it and cracked the oil pan. But the big concern was trying to capture the oil, because they could weld the oil pan, but they couldn't get oil.
Yeah. And, it's little things. Like, most of the cars in Cuba have one windshield wiper. It's because they can't get blades. It's just all the little things. And we try to bring those things, too. And if we know people in Cuba, oftentimes they'll give us wish lists of whether, what kind of car parts they need to keep their cars running. The wealthier people manage to get the parts easier. But, an average Cuban makes about $20 a month from the government. Those are like government jobs. And actually what we're seeing now is that a lot of Cubans are leaving the government jobs and going into the private sector and becoming tour guides and taxi drivers and so on. So that sounds good, except in the last month, Cuba has been realizing that, that's not benefiting the government, and so they're trying to tax these people more. It's a very tough situation. And, we don't go to support the Cuban government. We go to support the people that need the help. And so it's I don't know, it's a tough situation. We stay in private homes because most of the hotels are owned by the Cuban government. We eat at small little restaurants called paladars instead of the main restaurants, because the big restaurants are owned by the Cuban government. And when you stay in these government-owned places, the profits go to the Cuban Department of Defense, which is something we definitely don't want. So we really work hard on our trips to keep the money, with the people and not with the government.
Yeah, wasn't part of...
But the cars... Go ahead.
I was going to say, wasn't part of the... originally, when you went to Cuba, part of it was you were supposed to sort of interact with Cuban families. That was sort of almost a requirement.
Yeah, well, there's 8 or 9 different requirements, and you have to fit into one of them. But yeah, that's it. It was basically to help the Cuban people. There's other reasons you can go. You can actually go, like, if you're participating, I think, in a sporting event, like a marathon or something. But yeah, that is one of the list. They call it license, one of the licenses to fit into. So they called it at the time people to people. I think now they don't use that term. But yeah, that was, to interact and to meet people. It's very different, I will tell you, because people probably listen to your show in other places, including Canada. And, if you're Canadian or from other countries, you don't have the restrictions that Americans have. And many times Canadians will go to Cuba and they go to the resorts. And I'm not saying anything bad about them. It's just what they do. They go to all-inclusive resorts, and they usually don't leave the properties. Americans aren't allowed to go to those kind of resorts. So there's a very different experience. I think that's the whole point I'm trying to explain, is that if you're coming from other countries, you don't necessarily have the same experience that Americans have when they go to Cuba. You stay in different places, you see different things.
Yeah, I know when I went to the Dominican Republic once, it was sort of like, oh, it's just a short trip to Cuba if you want to go. Want to go to Cuba for 2 days while you're in the Dominican for a week. And I was surprised how easy, and I didn't do it, but I was surprised how easy it was compared to how difficult I heard it was to get from the United States to Cuba. And, it was back in, the, 50s and 60s. You would just take a quick boat ride from Key West to Cuba, right? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's like 90 miles.
Right.
So it's amazing.
Yeah, and you've been going for 11 or so years now. How has Cuba changed in that 11 years? And it doesn't sound like it's changed for the better.
I think that the people have a much more difficult time. But like many places, there are very wealthy people in Cuba, I'm surprised. I didn't realize it, but now you can bring American cars there, like new cars.
Oh,
not going through Canada. I used to think that you had to go through Canada or another country or Mexico to ship a car to Cuba, but now you can go through a broker, not through a dealership, but by a private broker that will purchase a car for you, and then they put it on a cargo ship and send it to Cuba. Prices are ridiculous. I mean, they're so high, and the taxes that you pay in Cuba. But, one thing that has helped the Cuban people is the private enterprise. And like I said, there's more like B&Bs that we stay in or private restaurants and private stores. But unfortunately, in the last couple months, Cuba is trying to tax them more, or they're trying to, they're trying to make it more difficult for the private enterprise. Private enterprise is very new in Cuba, and like I said, it's taking business away from the government. But hopefully the private enterprise will succeed, because that's how people are surviving.
Yeah, I think, I think when people see some of these cars in Cuba, they're amazed, and seeing 50s and 60s cars. But when you get up close, they don't quite always look as good as they do in the pictures, do they?
Oh, not at all. A lot of Bondo, very little, original things. But yet, they make it work, and the people are so proud. They have so much pride in their work. And they have so much pride in everything they do, which makes visiting Cuba so special, because it's all about the people and the cars, but the people are so special.
Yeah.
And, so they love to show you what they have. And, that's the best part. And they're so thankful for anything. They're just amazing people.
Yeah.
And I don't speak Spanish, so it's not always easy, but it's a wonderful visit.
Yeah, I know, where we throw so many things out, and when I watch, some of these kind of backyard mechanics, and that's probably a wrong term to use, and they're making things out of, an old tire. They're making an O-ring or a cup for a master cylinder out of an old tire, and they're kind of using some kind of homemade lathe to do it, and they make it work afterwards. And I'm like, sheesh, and I hear from listeners and readers that they can't get an exhaust pipe for a 1982 Nissan, and I'm like, yeah, but these people are making stuff out of almost anything and making a car work, and it's amazing that they're able to do that. And I was talking to somebody a couple of years ago that went to Cuba, and they were in a Cuban taxi cab that was literally powered by like a engine out of a tractor, and they sort of had to start it. They started it with gasoline, but then they had some kind of homemade fuel concoction. They had to change over once it was running, and because they said, well, gasoline's so expensive, and we can kind of make this, alcohol-based stuff, and it makes the car run. And it's like the idea that you're doing that is just amazing, and it's a great story to tell. If people want to find out a little bit more about you, I know you've sort of retired from the spy business, but is there some place they can learn more about your trips to Cuba and other things?
They can. Yes and no. It's easy. I'm just trying to think real quick. They can send me an email, which is just brendapriddy@gmail.com. Or they can go to my car Facebook page, which is Brenda Priddy and Company, and they can always send me a message there if they don't see anything about the next Cuba trip. We're going back in February, late February, early March. And so I'm real excited about that.
Yeah. So if a listener out there wants to join you in Cuba, they can send you a note, and maybe they can find out a little bit more about the Cuba experience.
Definitely. And we have like two versions. We have like just Havana, I think it's like 4 or 5 days, and then we have an extended trip, which is 9 days.
Oh, okay.
So it's a little something for everybody.
Sounds perfect. Brenda, thank you for taking a little time out of your Sunday morning and joining us on the Car Doctor program.
Well, it's my pleasure. Let's do it again before another 25 years.
Something like that. Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, take care and have a great rest of the weekend.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. Why don't we take a break, pay some bills? My name's John Paul. This is the Car Doctor program. If you want to join us, our phone number is 781-837-4900. When we come back, we'll talk about the Mazda CX-50 and then maybe go over some of the stuff about the Honda Pilot. But until then, stay right there. Don't go away. You're listening to the Car Doctor program on 95.9 WATD. We'll be right back.
AAA is with you at every moment in your life. They have 24/7 roadside assistance, which covers you in any car you're driving or riding in, even a rental or your friend's wheels. They have great member rates on home and auto insurance, savings on travel, hotels, and rental cars, and discounts on hundreds of your favorite brands. You're covered on and off the road. Learn more at aaa.com/join.
Hi, my name is John Sherman, and I'm from Snug Harbor Community Chorus. We will be starting rehearsals for our upcoming Christmas concert on Monday, September 9th at Pilgrim Church on Washington Street in Duxbury from 7 to 9:15 p.m. Our performance dates are December 14th and 15th. We are always looking for new members. No audition is required. For more information, go to snugharborcc.org or call me at 617-943-1747. We hope to see you there.
This is Dan Cloutier.
And this is Kim Jennings.
We're from Birch Bear Records. Tune into Twilight Showcase Radio.
Hosted by Sandy Stride and Keith James.
On 95.9 WATD and 95.9WATD.com.
Search for Twilight Showcase on Facebook and visit twilightshowcase.org.
Twilight Showcase, tonight from 8 to 10 on 95.9 WATD. Make an appointment Sunday morning at 11 for John Paul, the Car Doctor, on 95.9 WATD. Now, back to the Car Doctor.
And welcome back to the Car Doctor program on 95.9 WATD. It's fun catching up with people you haven't talked to in a really long time, and a very interesting person. I promised we'd talk about the Mazda CX-50. The Mazda CX-50 is kind of an interesting vehicle. It's kind of a more rugged version of the CX-5, maybe. It shares the same platform with the CX-30 crossover. It has the same engine, 6-speed automatic transmission as the CX-5. Where it differs in its ability to handle a variety of driving situations is slightly more ground clearance, a little heavier duty suspension that rides a little bit harder. Buyers do have a choice of a 2.5-liter four-cylinder 187 horsepower engine or a turbocharged 227 horsepower engine. Interestingly, the turbocharged engine gains 29 horsepower when it runs on 93 octane gas, so it bumps it up to whatever that would be, almost 250 some odd horsepower. Abundance of trim levels, I think there's 9 of them. Our road test was in the top of the line Turbo Premium. It had leather interior, panoramic sunroof. It looked and felt like a luxury car based on the interior. It had every electronics feature you could imagine. On the road, the turbocharged engine gives it kind of a sporty feeling, certainly. The engine's certainly powerful enough for day-to-day driving and hustles the CX-50 to 60 miles an hour, according to their numbers, in under 7 seconds. The ride's pretty comfortable. It is a little, I think, because they tuned it to be a little bit more off-roady. It's a little bit stiffer ride maybe than like the CX-5. Also, and I don't know why, and I should have walked down to a neighbor's house who has a CX-5 and compared the two. But the interior, to me, of the CX-50 felt a little bit tighter than the CX-5. Front seats were comfortable, supportive. Rear seat, yeah, 3 friendly adults back there. Options to make it comfortable, tilt and telescoping wheel and all that sort of stuff. I did notice a little bit of a blind spot backing up, although backup camera works really well. And like a lot of cars, right rear corner of the car, a little hard to see sometimes. Cargo area is pretty generous, 31 cubic feet with all the seats in use. Expands to 56 cubic feet. So that should be suitable for all kinds of gear. The CX-50 is, certainly comfortable to drive, 23 miles per gallon in the city, 29 miles per gallon on the highway. It is in top of the line trim. It gets pretty pricey, though. I want to say the MSRP on this, with everything in it, now this is granted everything in it, was up around $46,000. It was a little bit more expensive than I expected it to be. But it is a really high-class interior, premium touches throughout. I think they did a good job of bridging the gap between kind of a more urban-focused CX-5 and the smaller CX-30. And, somehow they managed to get, a little bit of off-road capability. It's you're not going to be, driving the Baja with it. Maybe you would, I don't know, but you still managed to get some zoom along the way. So I think they did a good job with it. But like I said, the price I thought was a little bit high, but then again, it was in top trim level, and you can buy them certainly cheaper with something that's not quite as expensive. And I said last week I kind of rushed over the Honda Pilot, and I just wanted to kind of go over some key features of that again. 3.5 liter V6 engine, 280 horsepower, 262 pound-feet of torque. It can tow up to 5,000 pounds. I don't know that I mentioned that. So if you have a camping trailer, boat trailer, jet skis, utility trailer, is going to handle that with no problems at all. 9-speed automatic transmission, I think, is one of the better ones. It is, transmission shifts really well, smooth, always seems to be in the right gear. Honda uses something called their IVTM4. What does that mean? It's their intelligent all-wheel drive system. It should be great in snowy winter weather. All the Pilots always were good in the wintertime. It was kind of funny. While I was driving this a few weeks ago, I parked next to an older Pilot, and I liked the older Pilots when they came out, when they were new back then. And all they've done is seemingly make the Pilot better all the time. I think the ride is comfortable. It seems like they have it tuned more for a comfortable ride. Ours was in the black edition, which just means more luxurious stuff, blacked out wheels, grille, etc. I'm not a fan of special edition sort of things like this, because it is still the same engine, different wheels and stuff. It gives it a little bit different look. The second row seats, which I sat back there, I sit in all 3 rows when it's a 3-row vehicle. If it's a 2-row vehicle, I sit in both rows, just because I'm always curious, if I was sitting in the front seat, could I sit comfortably in the back seat? And in the Honda Pilot, definitely. 3rd row seat, a little bit tight, but you could certainly, put some adults back there for a little time. Cargo space in the Pilot, I said that the 56 cubic feet of the CX-50 was pretty good. 84 cubic feet with all the seats folded down in the Pilot. So if you have some large things you need to carry, you spend a lot of time at the home improvement store, whatever you're doing, Honda Pilot's going to be a pretty good vehicle for that. Like I said, every safety system, infotainment system, big touchscreen, which was kind of nice. I felt it took a little bit of time to get used to using it, but once you get used to it, it worked pretty well. So bottom line on the Honda Pilot, well-rounded SUV. It excels in both style, comfort, and functionality. I think if you're somebody who has some kids, or you have to carry around kids and their friends, you have a use for an SUV that can tow 5,000 pounds. Maybe you have a sailboat, and people with sailboats always seem to carry lots of extra stuff with them. Or you go snowmobiling and you want someplace to keep all your stuff dry, and you don't want to do it with a pickup truck. Honda Pilot would be a good choice. So there we go, Honda Pilot. If you want to join us, our phone number is 781-837-4900, 781-837-4900. Phone lines are open if you want to pop in and say hello. Got some interesting emails this week. One of them was from somebody who they wanted to know where they could get a new key fob for their Toyota Highlander. And the reason is, wherever they live on a 9th floor, and they had someone, I guess they forgot their keys, and said, hey, toss the key fob down to me, and they missed. And it hit the street and smashed into a million pieces, so it's broken. And they wanted to know where you could get a key fob online that would actually work. Well, you can't. If you go to eBay, if you go to any of the websites where you can get clone key fobs, not the original equipment ones, but clone key fobs, you need to bring them someplace to be programmed. That could be a locksmith, that could be the dealer, that could be a good independent garage that has the capability to clone a key fob or make a new one. Gets a little trickier if you've lost all the keys. There is one company that looks pretty interesting. It's called Tom's Key. And what they do is they sell you a kind of pretty good-looking copy of in this case, a Toyota key fob, and then they rent you a device that makes the copy. So their key fobs, and I'm kind of making the amount up, $150 or something like that, and then for $69.95 they rent you the thing to make the copy, and then you send it back when you're done with it. And if you don't send it back, I guess they keep the security deposit. So there's a $69.95 to rent it and $50 or something for a security deposit. So that's an alternative, but it does require a little bit of, it's not completely simple. In fact, when I was looking it up, I tried to find, show me how it's done. Do a video of how it's done, and they never really did that. So I don't know if it's more complicated than it looks. They do get good reviews, so I can't really argue about that. So I did try someone reached out to me once from Tom's Key, and I said to them, I'd love to talk to you on the radio about it. And they said their Sunday mornings are always busy, so they weren't able to do that. And then I didn't hear back. So I don't know if that's not always a good sign. Somebody else writes to me, I have a 6-year-old battery. They said to me, if you had a 6-year-old battery in your car that tested at 12.5 volts, would you keep using it or replace it? Voltage isn't the whole story when it comes to batteries. That's the problem. If it was, you wouldn't need these fancy battery testers. 12.5 volts indicates about an 85% state of charge. So first off, it's not a fully charged battery. What is more critical is the cold cranking amperage numbers. And, when combined with voltage, that tells you a better story about, what kind of shape that battery's in. As an example, the battery in my car, which is now 6 years old, the battery voltage is 12.7 volts, and the cold cranking amperage is 690 amps. I think the battery is rated at 750 amps. 12.7 volts tells me that battery is at about a 95% state of charge. I'm going to keep using it. I see nothing wrong with it. Battery looks fine. It tests out fine. And I've tested it with both. I got a battery tester that works pretty well. It was really inexpensive. I think it was $50. Then, of course, 3 weeks afterwards, they came out with a kind of refurbished lineup of tools, and the company was Topdon, Tobdon, and they came out with a refurbished battery tester, which was only like $29. But I thought this one for, I don't know, $50 did a really good job. It would give you the numbers. It was quick and easy to use. I also have the B2Q tester, which AAA uses, which is a really good tester because it actually looks at battery temperature, which none of these other ones do, and it gives you a little bit more accurate reading. Tested the battery in my car both times, and I'll test it again before I leave for Florida in a few months, just to make sure it's okay, because you hate to be somewhere, stop at a rest area or gas station, turn the key, and have a dead battery, which is another reason why I tend to bring a battery jump starter with me, just in case I need it. Our phone number again, 781-837-4900, 781-837-4900. Couple lines open if you want to join us, like Tom from Weymouth is going to join us. Tom, good morning.
John, a couple of months ago, maybe, you mentioned a place where you could junk cars and you get like $900. Do you remember where that was?
I don't.
I don't either.
And somebody told us about it, and they said try here, and I was hoping it was you.
I'm worse than you because I wrote it down. And I can't find it, but if I do find it, I'll email it to you.
Yeah, because it was a charity. It was kind of a charity kind of thing, and the people were getting a lot more money than just scrap value for the vehicles. And in fact, someone wrote to me the other day and asked me a very similar question, and I'm like, I wish I could remember what it was, and I can't. So I'm hoping whoever that was will call us and let us know. So
yeah, that would be nice. Another little thing there. I was changing the oil on my sister's CRV. It's 2012, and and beside the drain nut, there are a couple of other bolts. Look like they're bolted, and they're using the pan as some kind of a mount. I'm not too familiar with that. The first one I looked under there, I seen three in them. Go, geez, which one is the drain plug? Just quickly.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, wow, that's it there. And then there's a couple of others.
Yeah.
And it almost seems like a bracket, and they're using the drain pan, as a mount. But these...
Well, there are vehicles that certainly that that they'll use. Look at a lot of motorcycles. They'll use the motorcycle engine as part of this. Part of the suspension, and gives it rigidity of the vehicle. And what they probably did with that was a way to give some additional stabilization to the engine, although you have to wonder whether the engine shakes a little bit if you get a little bit of vibration back up through the body or not. But yeah, you think of that as that, and that's probably an aluminum pan on that, maybe.
It seems, it definitely is aluminum. Heavy grade aluminum.
So they use it. So they use it as a stressed member of the suspension system and the vehicle itself, which probably gives that vehicle a little bit more rigidity than it would if it didn't have that there. So
and one other thing. On the washers now, I remember you mentioned that you changed the washer on the drain pan plug. Are they? Now, the one that's on there is a very heavy quite thick, 8 of an inch or so, just aluminum. But then I hear like crush washers, the kind that kind of actually crush. Is there anything specific for that? It just one as good as the other just keeps the thing from warping.
Yeah, I mean, could you put a fiber washer on or a Teflon washer on and not have it leak? Probably, but Honda, in its infinite wisdom, says that should be a crush washer. That's what they usually put in, and it's something that and a lot of cars have them. And if you looked at them, they look a little like an old spark plug washer, because there's two pieces that squish together. And that's what makes the seal, and that's what keeps you from over tightening the oil pan, which is one of the reasons why they put that on there. So and I think you can buy them for like 70 or 80 cents a piece. So yeah,
I did actually order some, but it was just that the ones I ordered were crush washers, and then the one that was on there, which was a very good aluminum washer, but it wasn't a crush, but it was quite thick.
Yeah. Yeah. No. In fact, my wife's Volkswagen uses a crush washer, but if you go to like Dorman Auto Parts, which has all those they come out with new. Theirs it looks like a washer that's made out of copper, and just a little different design, and probably with the idea that style can be used over and over again. With a crush washer, technically you're supposed to throw it away all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
And just one other thing you mentioned on Wix. I'm a Wix guy myself. But getting harder to find them.
Yeah.
And
I think part of that is that it's probably it's like the supermarket. There's probably a charge for where it gets put on the shelf, and who knows. So,
right.
Yeah. Okay, Tom. Always great to hear from you.
Thank you, John,
all right.
for talking to me.
All right. Of course. Take care. Bye-bye. 781-837-4900. Let's talk to Kate from Plymouth. Kate, good morning. Kate?
Kate actually just hung up.
Oh, she did? Well, Kate should call back at 781-837-4900. And while she's calling back, why don't we take a break? My name's John Paul. This is the Car Doctor program. You're listening on 95.9 WATD. We'll be right back.
I actually don't have commercials ready, but I do have Kate back on the line. If you
do. So again, it's me jumping the gun again, right? It's all my fault.
That's just me not being prepared.
Yeah. Let's talk to Kate. Kate, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good.
You can hear me now?
I can always hear you.
Oh, super. Good. So my question is this. On Monday, I'm going to be taking delivery on a new 2025 Camry hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, it comes with the standard factory warranties. And the question is, what are your thoughts on the worth of buying the extended warranties?
Well, first off, you're buying one of the better-made vehicles in the world, which is a good sign. Secondly, even though it's a new model, the technology is very similar to what's in the Toyota Crown. So even though it's new, it's not new. So it's the idea that the Camry is only available in a hybrid now is kind of a little bit unique compared to the way they used to be. And I'm always hesitant to buy an extended warranty while you already have such a good 3-year warranty to start off with. Now, if you got into 2.5 years with this car and you say, geez, I'm going back to the dealer all the time because, stuff breaks, then maybe at that point I consider, buying a warranty. Now, I will say that, if my coworker Ted Lyons is listening from AAA, he's going to say, why don't you just recommend a AAA warranty? And I'm one of those people that doesn't necessarily use, when you go to the store somewhere and they're like, oh, for an extra $7, do you want to buy the extended warranty? I always say no.
I do
because,
as well.
Yeah, because it's been my experience that, most of the time, it's an insurance policy that they're selling you that they hope you'll never use, and you hope that maybe you will, but at the end of the day, they do this because they make money at it. The other thing that I've found that from the manufacturer is when a dealer sells you a factory warranty, and a lot of times they'll say, we'll just roll it right into the payments. You won't even notice. It'll be another $10 a month or whatever. They make probably almost as much money on the warranty as they did selling you the car. So there's profit to be made in that. And sometimes you can say to them, well, I am interested in the warranty, but I'm not interested in the warranty at $2,500 or whatever it is. Can you sell me the warranty at a reduced price? And they can sometimes. But in general, with that car, if you said to me you were buying a Bentley, because, Kate, you should drive a Bentley instead of a Toyota. And you said, I'm thinking about buying a Bentley. Should I buy the extended warranty? Yes, because everything on a Bentley costs $1 million to fix. And it probably would be worth trying to do that. But Toyota Camrys are very dependable cars. Even as a hybrid, is extraordinarily dependable. It is the taxi cab of choice. In the communities that have to use alternative fuel vehicles, they get about 350,000 miles out of the battery before they have to replace them. It isn't anything that I would rush out to buy an extended warranty for.
Okay, that was my feeling, and that was the direction I was heading. But I thought this is the perfect time for me to ask, since I'm taking delivery Monday.
There you go. Well, call us back in a couple weeks and tell us how much you love the car.
I will do that. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Take care, Kate. Bye-bye. Jesse, you ready?
I'm so ready.
So ready? Why don't we take that last break? My name is John Paul. This is the Car Doctor program. You're listening on 95.9 WATD. We'll be right back.
Let's go to Nasrella's Farm of Marshfield. The end of summer is here, and so is Paul Nasrella, the owner of Nasrella's Farm. And he's here to tell us what's in store for September.
In September, when the days are getting shorter and the nights are colder, we offer a large selection and a good supply of firewood. So I encourage people to call and place their order or come and pick some up. Also, the mums, which everybody was watching grow in the field, they are ready. We're going to start bringing them up front, and we have them from 4-inch size pots all the way up to 12-inch pots.
And what about hanging baskets for the porch at Nasrella's Farm of Marshfield?
We have a pretty good selection of fall color hanging baskets, and we have an abundance of 4-inch annuals with all different colors, including ornamental peppers, kale, Swiss chard, stonecrop, and asters. I have a large selection of Jack's fertilizer, which we have been using for over 40 years. It is ideal on plants, vegetables. It's a good all-purpose fertilizer. Jack's Classics.
Nasrella's Farm of Marshfield. Nasrellas.com.
AAA is with you at every moment in your life. They have 24/7 roadside assistance, which covers you in any car you're driving or riding in, even a rental or your friend's wheels. They have great member rates on home and auto insurance, savings on travel, hotels, and rental cars, and discounts on hundreds of your favorite brands. You're covered on and off the road. Learn more at aaa.com/join.
Hey there, folks. It's Quinn Kelly reminding you to tune in Sunday night at 5 for the South Shore's first voice in sports talk radio, The Sports Exchange. Unmatched coverage of local high school action, as well as a relatable voice on all things Boston Pro Sports. We've got you covered live at 5 every Sunday night. Have a question for our host, missed last week's show, or just want to share a great sports story? You can find us on Twitter at SE on WATD. But remember, mark your calendar, folks, and we'll see you Sunday night at 5 for The Sports Exchange on 95.9 WATD.
Make an appointment Sunday morning at 11 for John Paul, the Car Doctor, on 95.9 WATD. Now, back to the Car Doctor.
And welcome back. We have Tom from Pembroke with us. Tom, do you have that answer for that donation company?
I don't. I was thinking that myself. I did hear it a few months back, but I don't.
Yeah, well.
But I do have a follow-up with that warranty, the last lady that called.
Okay, yep.
I wouldn't worry about it because they'll send you offers for the next 10 years in order to buy into a warranty.
Yeah, and my suggestion, and only because I work at AAA and I've been there for 40 years, is either go with the factory warranty or AAA's warranty, because I have seen so many warranty companies that advertise, will, never pay a car repair. And then they go out of business 2 years later and you're left with nothing. So, and never answer the phone call where it says, "Hi, this is the warranty company. Your factory warranty is expired. We want to sell you a new one." Don't fall for that, right?
Yep. Hey, I get them direct from the factory. Well, sponsor, whatever it is, it's Subaru all over it and everything. But my car, when the powertrain warranty expired, when the bumper-to-bumper warranty expired, I got that. And, I'm sure, as it gets older, I'll get the powertrain one. But it is, and again, if, being a Toyota Camry, it's a pretty dependable car. Oh, yeah. You should never have a problem with that thing. The only insurance I would recommend is like cheap furniture nowadays. I've used it many times, like an office chair. The leather will start peeling. Or it's only maybe $10, $20, and they just send you a check directly. They don't ask questions. They don't, they just say, take care of it yourself.
No, that's a good point because, it's, if you can, it is, when you look at it, I guess, and just this week you must have been, thinking about me. Just this week, my wife wanted, we live in a very small house now. Technically, I guess, I was watching TV yesterday and they were showing a couple looking at a tiny house, and it was the same size as the house I live in right now. And so everything in our house has to do two jobs. It can't just be, a bench. It has to be a bench with storage. And I put together some bench with storage the other day, and I'm like, I don't know how long this thing's going to last. And I was kind of hoping it did come with a warranty because it was from some company called Dorm Furniture, which that's not designed to last more than how long a kid lasts in college. So, although I will say, pretty amazing how companies like IKEA, build this furniture as quick as they do, and all the pieces actually fit together. But it is pretty amazing. Hey, that music means we got to go. So we got to say goodbye to you. All right, take care. Yep, bye-bye. Until next week, make sure you wear your seatbelt, drive safely, be good to your car, and if you see an emergency vehicle by the side of the road, slow down or move over. It saves lives. Talk to you all next week. Bye-bye.